Hello again. Welcome back to our sanctuary of stories. Before we begin tonight's journey, take a moment to find your most comfortable position. Adjust your pillows, pull the blanket up to your chin, and let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Tonight, we are leaving the noise of our world behind. We are traveling far across the stars to a time long past, to hear the story of a soul who was misunderstood from the very moment he took his first breath. This is the story of Broly. Unlike the other warriors we have spoken about, Goku, who fought for the thrill of the challenge, or Vegeta, who fought for his pride, Broly is a warrior who never wanted to fight at all. His story is not one of conquest, but of survival. It is a tragedy of circumstance, a tale of a gentle heart encased in a power so vast that it became a cage. Tonight, we begin at the very beginning. Before the battles, before the rage, before the legendary Super Saiyan. We begin with a child, a father, and a cold, red planet floating in the silence of deep space. So, close your eyes. Let the darkness of the room wrap around you like a comforting embrace. Let go of the day and let us drift to the planet Vegeta, 41 years ago. The year is age 732. The location is the royal capital of Planet Vegeta. Imagine, if you will, the sky of this world. It is not the blue we know, but a deep, bruised red, creating an eternal twilight that hangs heavy over the landscape. The gravity here is intense, 10 times stronger than that of Earth. It is a weight that presses down on everything, stripping the land of softness. The mountains are jagged spires of red rock, jutting up like teeth against the crimson horizon. The wind that howls through the canyons carries the scent of sulfur and dust. It is a harsh world, a world that demands strength just to exist upon its surface. In the center of this harsh landscape stands the royal palace. It is a massive structure built from polished stone and cold metal, looming over the capital city like a monolith. It is a fortress designed not for comfort, but to intimidate. Deep within the bowels of this palace, sheltered from the red winds outside, lies the royal nursery. It is quiet here. The only sound is the low, rhythmic hum of machinery. The air is cool and sterile, smelling of ozone and nutrient fluids. Rows of circular pots line the walls, glowing with a soft, pale light. These are the incubation tanks, the cradles of the Saiyan race. Inside each pot, suspended in healing liquid, floats a Saiyan infant. They sleep in weightlessness, wires and tubes monitoring their vital signs, measuring their heart rates and, most importantly, their battle power. To the Saiyans, a child is not judged by their laughter or their curiosity. They are judged by a number. They are measured by their potential for violence. In the center of this room, in a place of honor, rests the port of Prince Vegeta. He is small, his hair already standing up in that distinctive flame-like shape that he will carry for the rest of his life. Even in sleep, his brow is furrowed, as if he is already dreaming of conquest. The monitors surrounding his tank beep steadily, displaying numbers that would make any ordinary Saiyan soldier tremble with pride. He is the heir, the prodigy, the future king who will lead their race to dominance across the galaxy. But nearby, in a pot that looks identical to the princess, sleeps another child. His name is Broly. He floats gently in the green fluid, his small hands curled into fists. He looks peaceful. He looks innocent. There is nothing about his physical form that suggests he is different from any other baby in the room. He has a tail curled loosely around his leg. He has a shock of black hair. He has the small, vulnerable frame of a newborn. But the machines telling his story are telling a different tale. The scouter attached to his tank is malfunctioning. The numbers flickering on the green screen are erratic, climbing higher and higher, fluctuating with the rhythm of the sleeping child's breath. The technicians who monitor this room check the equipment daily, convinced it must be an error. They recalibrate the sensors, they run diagnostics, but the result is always the same. This child, this son of a high-ranking commander named Paragus, possesses a latent power that defies logic. It is a power that feels deep, like an ocean with no bottom. It is quiet yet overwhelming. It is dormant yet terrifying. While Prince Vegeta's power is a bright, burning flame, Broly's power is like a sleeping earthquake. It is vast. It is unnatural. And to the king of this world, it is unforgivable. King Vegeta stands in the doorway of the nursery. His cape, heavy and red, brushes against the metallic floor. He is a proud man, a man who has built his entire identity on the belief that his bloodline is superior. He looks at his son's tank, and a smile touches his lips. He sees the future of his dynasty. He sees the warrior who will finally free them from the grip of Lord Frieza. But then, his gaze shifts to the tank beside it. The smile fades. His eyes narrow. He walks over to Broly's pot, his boots echoing in the silent room. He looks at the numbers on the screen. They are higher than his son's. They are significantly higher. A cold feeling settles in the king's chest. It is not awe. It is not pride in his race's potential. It is fear. Pure, primitive fear. In Saiyan culture, strength is the only hierarchy. If this child grows up, if this mutant, as the king calls him in his mind, is allowed to develop, what happens to the royal family? What happens to the prince? A subject cannot be stronger than the king. It disrupts the order of things. It threatens the very foundation of their society. King Vegeta places a gloved hand on the glass of Broly's tank. The child inside stirs, shifting in the fluid. The king feels a spike of energy radiate from the pot, enough to make the glass vibrate beneath his fingertips. It is unacceptable. The king turns away, his cape swirling around him. He has made his decision. It is a cruel decision, born of jealousy and insecurity. But in his mind, it is necessary for the stability of his rule. This anomaly cannot remain. This child cannot be allowed to outshine the prince. He walks out of the nursery, the heavy doors sliding shut behind him with a hiss, sealing the quiet room once more. He leaves the two infants floating in the dark, one destined for greatness and one destined for exile. The throne room of Planet Vegeta is a vast, cavernous hall. Tall pillars stretch up into the shadows of the ceiling. At the far end sits the throne, a simple hard seat from which King Vegeta rules. The doors burst open. A man rushes in, breathless, panic evident in his eyes. It is Paragus. Paragus is a loyal soldier. He is a decorated commander, a man who has served the king faithfully for years. He wears the traditional Saiyan armor, white and yellow, with a dark cape draped over his shoulder. But in this moment, he is not a commander. He is a father. He falls to his knees before the throne, his head bowed low. "King Vegeta," he pleads, his voice echoing off the cold stone walls. "Please, I beg you to reconsider." The king looks down at him, his expression impassive. "The decision has been made, Paragus. The boy is a danger." "A danger?" Paragus dares to look up, confusion warring with desperation on his face. "He is a child. He's a resource for our people. If his power is as great as they say, think of what he could do for the Saiyan army. He could be the key to defeating Frieza. He could be a legend." The king's eyes flash with anger. He stands up, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "Do not lecture me on the future of our race, Commander. The boy's power is unstable. It is erratic. He will lose control. He will destroy us all." It is a lie. They both know it is a lie. The king is not afraid Broly will destroy the planet. He is afraid Broly will destroy the king's legacy. "I am sending him away," the king continues, his voice cold and final, "to a frontier world. He will be useful there, expanding our territory." Paragus feels a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. "Which world, sire?" The king pauses. A cruel smile plays on his lips. "Planet Vampa." Paragus freezes. The name hangs in the air like a death sentence. Vampa. Everyone in the Frieza Force knows of Vampa. It is a wasteland, a planet on the fringes of the galaxy, devoid of intelligent life, plagued by storms and infested with monstrous creatures. It is not a world for colonization. It is a grave. "Vampa?" Paragus whispers, his voice trembling. "But no one can survive on Vampa, especially not a child. You are sending him to his death." "He is a Saiyan!" The king barks, sitting back down. "If he is truly a prodigy, he will survive. Now, leave me." Paragus stares at his king. In that moment, loyalty dies. In that moment, the soldier vanishes, and only a father remains. A father filled with a burning, cold hatred. He stands up slowly. He does not bow. He turns and walks out of the throne room, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turn white. He will not let his son die. He will not let this jealousy erase his bloodline. He rushes to the hangar bay, his mind racing, formulating a plan. He has to get to a ship. He has to follow the pod. He has to save his son. Meanwhile, in the launch bay, a single round space pod sits in the chute. Inside, baby Broly is crying. Perhaps he senses the separation. Perhaps the cold of the pod is different from the warmth of the nursery tank. Or perhaps, on some instinctual level, he feels the rejection of his own people. His cries are loud, echoing inside the small metal sphere. The launch sequence engages. The mechanical clamps holding the pod release with a heavy clank. The engines fire, a burst of blue energy that illuminates the dark hangar. With a roar, the pod shoots upward. It pierces the red sky of Planet Vegeta, climbing higher and higher, punching through the heavy atmosphere. The red clouds part, and suddenly the pod breaks free. Silence. The roar of the engines fades into the vacuum of space. The pod enters hypersleep mode. The crying stops as the gas fills the chamber, lulling the child into a deep artificial slumber. The pod streaks through the cosmos like a tiny silver pebble thrown into a vast, dark ocean. It passes by nebulae that swirl with colors of violet and gold. It flies past burning stars and frozen moons. Inside, Broly sleeps, his small chest rising and falling. He's alone. He's drifting through the infinite blackness, a tiny speck of life in a universe that is cold and indifferent. He travels for days. The pod's computer navigates the star charts, locking onto the coordinates programmed by the cruel king. The destination approaches. Planet Vampa. From space, it looks like a bruised fruit. It is yellow and brown, covered in thick, swirling clouds that promise nothing but turbulence. There are no blue oceans. There are no green forests. It is a harsh, rugged rock orbiting a dying star. The pod enters the atmosphere. The silence breaks. The ship begins to shake violently as it hits the turbulence. Lightning arcs across the viewing port, illuminating the dark clouds. The pod is tossed around like a leaf in a hurricane. The sensors scream warnings. The landing thrusters fire, trying to stabilize the descent, but the winds are too strong. Crash. The pod slams into the surface of the planet. It skids across a rocky plain, carving a deep trench into the hard earth before coming to a halt against a cliffside. The metal is scorched. The glass is cracked. For a long moment, there is stillness. The only sound is the howling of the wind outside. Then, a hiss of air. The hatch of the pod pops open. The air of Vampa rushes in. It is hot and dry. It smells of sulfur and ancient dust. Baby Broly wakes up. He is confused. He is hungry. He is alone on a monster-infested world, light years away from the only home he has ever known. Back in space, another ship is cutting through the void. It is a stolen freighter, old and clunky, pushing its engines to the limit. Paragus sits at the helm. His eyes are bloodshot. He has not slept since he left Planet Vegeta. He is tracking the signal of his son's pod, a faint blip on his radar screen. "Hold on, Broly," he whispers to the empty cockpit. "I'm coming." He is accompanied by a single pilot, a Beats, a nervous Saiyan who had the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time when Paragus commandeered the ship. Beats looks at the coordinates and swallows hard. "Commander," Beats says, his voice shaking. "We are approaching Vampa. The atmospheric turbulence is off the charts. This ship, it's not designed for a landing in those conditions. We might not be able to take off again." Paragus does not look at him. "I don't care about taking off. I care about landing. The yellow planet looms large in the viewport. Paragus grips the controls. He dives into the storm. The descent is brutal. The freighter is much larger than a spacepod, and the winds catch it immediately. The metal groans under the pressure. Alarms blare throughout the cockpit. Sparks fly from the control panel. "We're losing the stabilizer," Beats screams. "Keep her steady," Paragus roars, wrestling with the yoke. They break through the cloud layer, and the barren landscape of Vampa stretches out below them. It is a nightmare of jagged canyons and endless wastelands. Paragus spots the faint energy signature of the spacepod in the distance. "There," he points. But the ship is coming in too hot. The engines sputter and die, choked by the thick dust of the atmosphere. The ship creates a massive plume of smoke as it slams into the ground, bouncing once, twice before crashing into a ravine. The metal twists and buckles. The windshield shatters. Silence returns. Groaning, Paragus pushes a piece of debris off his lap. He checks his body, bruised, battered, but alive. He looks over at Beats, who is unconscious but breathing. Paragus kicks the emergency release of the door. It falls open with a clang. He stumbles out onto the surface of Vampa. The heat hits him first, then the wind. He pulls his scouter from his pocket and puts it on. He scans the horizon. "Broly," he rasps. He sees a power level. It is small, but it is there. It is about 2 miles to the east. Paragus begins to run. He ignores the pain in his ribs. He ignores the strange, skittering sounds coming from the shadows of the canyon. He runs with the desperation of a father who knows he is the only thing standing between his child and death. He finds the pod nestled against the cliff. It is dark now, night falling over Vampa. The planet has 3 moons, casting long, eerie shadows across the rocks. The pod is empty. Paragus feels his heart stop. "Broly," he calls out. The wind steals his voice. He scans the area again. He detects a movement in a cave nearby, a small energy reading. But there is another reading, a massive one. A giant creature looking like a cross between a spider and a tick is crawling out of the darkness of the cave. It is the size of a house. Its mandibles click together, dripping with saliva. It is looking down at something small on the ground. It is looking at Broly. The infant is sitting in the dirt, looking up at the monster. He is not crying anymore. He is staring at the creature with wide, curious eyes. The monster lunges. "No!" Paragus screams, gathering energy in his hand. But before he can fire, something happens. The baby's eyes flash. A green aura, faint but undeniable, erupts around the child's body. Broly raises a tiny hand. Boom! A shockwave of energy blasts from the infant. It hits the giant insect, sending the massive creature tumbling backward. It smashes into the canyon wall, screeching in pain and fear. The creature scrambles away, disappearing into the dark, terrified of the tiny being. Paragus stops in his tracks. He stares, breathless. He has seen powerful Saiyan children before. He has seen Prince Vegeta train. But He has never seen anything like this. A baby, hours old, driving back a predator 10 times his size with pure instinct. The green aura fades. Broly looks around, sees Paragus, and reaches out his arms. Paragus walks forward slowly. He falls to his knees in the dust. He picks up his son. The boy is heavy, solid. Broly coos, grabbing Paragus's thumb. Paragus holds him close, looking out at the desolate, hostile landscape. The ship is wrecked. They are stranded. They have no food, no water, no way to contact anyone. They are exiles. But as he looks down at the child, a new feeling takes root in Paragus's heart. It is no longer just fear for his son's safety. It is ambition. They threw us away, Paragus whispers into the wind. They threw us away like garbage. But they made a mistake, Broly. They let us live. He looks up at the moons of Vampa. We will survive this place. We will grow strong, and one day we will have our revenge. The wind howls over the wasteland, carrying the promise of a long, dark exile. Broly rests his head against his father's armor and closes his eyes. Finally safe, finally asleep, unaware that his long nightmare has only just begun. The pod has crashed. The engines have gone cold. The silence of the cosmos has been replaced by the howling winds of a forgotten world. We are back on Vampa. If you are just joining us, or if your mind has drifted, let yourself settle back into the story. Imagine a world where the sun never truly shines, where the sky is a bruised yellow, and where time does not move in hours or days, but in the slow, grinding erosion of rock. Survival is a cruel teacher. It does not explain, it demonstrates. And on Planet Vampa, the first lesson Paragus had to learn was that resources were finite. The crashed ship, the stolen freighter that had brought them here, was a ruin. Smoke still curled from its twisted metal skeleton days after the impact. Paragus had scavenged everything he could: ration bars, water canisters, thermal blankets. But it wasn't enough. Not for 2 adult Saiyans and a growing child. Paragus stood by the wreckage, looking at the pilot, Beats. Beats was injured, terrified, huddling in the shadow of the broken wing. He was looking at his scouter, hoping for a rescue signal that would never come. Paragus looked at the supplies. He did the math in his head. A week of food for 3 people, or a month of food for 2. The wind howled through the canyon, masking the sound of the energy blaster charging up. Paragus watched the dust swirl around his boots, his mind cold and calculating. There was no room for sentiment here. The universe had been cruel to them, and now he had to be cruel in return. It was not a decision made out of malice. It was a decision made out of cold Saiyan logic. To Paragus, survival was the only metric that mattered. Revenge against King Vegeta required him to live. It required Broly to live. Anyone else was simply a caloric expense they could not afford. The blast was quick, a flash of light in the gloom. And then there was one less heartbeat on Vampa. Paragus did not mourn. He simply turned back to the supplies, gathering them up, his face hard and unreadable. He walked back to the cave where he had hidden his son. This was the reality of their new life. Compassion was a luxury of the civilized. Here, in the wasteland, there was only the eater and the eaten. Time began to blur. The days on Vampa were long, the rotation of the planet slow and agonizing. There was no sunrise to mark the morning, only a brightening of the yellow clouds. There was no sunset, only a deepening of the shadows into a suffocating black. Broly grew. Saiyan children are resilient. They are built for war, their bodies designed to adapt to harsh gravity and brutal conditions. But Broly was not just adapting. He was thriving in the hostile environment. He learned to walk on the shifting shale of the cliffs. He learned to run against the gale force winds that would have knocked a human flat. His muscles grew dense, adapting to the crushing gravity until movement became second nature. But the hunger was constant. The rations from the ship ran out within months. Paragus, stripped of his dignity as a commander, became a hunter-gatherer. He learned which of the massive, tick-like creatures were edible. They were called Vampa beetles. They were monstrous things, the size of boulders, with hard, chitinous shells and mandibles that could snap bone. But inside, they were filled with a thick green fluid. This became their life source. Imagine the taste: bitter, viscous, metallic. It tasted of sulfur and stagnant water. It had the texture of sludge, coating the tongue in a way that made it hard to swallow. For breakfast, green slime. For dinner, green slime. For 41 years, this would be the only flavor Broly would ever know. He would never taste bread, warm from an oven. He would never know the sweetness of a fruit, the juice bursting in his mouth. He would never know the savory comfort of cooked meat or the refreshment of clean, cold water. His palate was formed by the harshness of his world. Paragus watched his son eat the foul substance, guilt gnawing at him deeper than hunger ever could. He saw the boy wipe the green ichor from his mouth, his expression blank. Broly did not complain. He did not know there was anything else. To him, this was simply what life was. Eating was not a pleasure. It was a chore, a necessary act to keep the fire of his energy burning. They lived in a cave, high up in a spire of rock, safe from the nocturnal predators. The cave was damp, smelling of wet stone and the musk of the pelts they used for warmth. At night, the temperature dropped until the air froze in their lungs. They slept huddled together for warmth, a fallen commander and a banished prince, shivering in the dark while the storms raged outside. The wind would scream past the cave mouth, sounding like lost souls. But inside, there was only the steady breathing of the boy and the restless plotting of the father. As Broly grew from a toddler into a child, his power began to manifest in frightening ways. He was strong, unnaturally strong. He could punch through the rock walls of their cave with a tantrum. He could leap hundreds of feet into the air, clearing canyons in a single bound. But he was lonely. The isolation of Vampa was absolute. There were no other voices, no other faces. Paragus was not a companion. He was a drill sergeant. He spent his days training Broly, forcing the boy to fight, to harness his anger, to become a weapon. "Do it again!" Paragus would shout, his voice echoing off the canyon walls as Broly struck a boulder until his knuckles bled. "You must be stronger, for the king, for our revenge." Broly didn't understand revenge. He didn't know who King Vegeta was. He didn't know what a king was. He only knew that his father was always angry, always demanding. He knew that love, or whatever version of it his father offered, was conditional. It was earned through violence. It was earned through obedience. So Broly sought companionship elsewhere. The Vampa beetles were mindless, aggressive monsters. They offered no solace. But there was something else on the planet. Something bigger. Something ancient. In the deep craters of the wasteland lived the Ba. They were colossal, snake-like beasts, covered in thick, shaggy green fur. Their faces were terrifying, with rows of razor-sharp teeth and unblinking yellow eyes. But they were intelligent in a primitive, instinctual way. They were the apex predators of this world, moving with a slow, heavy grace that commanded respect. One day, while exploring away from his father's watchful eye, Broly found one. He was 7 years old. He was standing on the edge of a crater when the massive head rose up from the depths. It was the size of a building. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping a vent, vibrating through the ground beneath Broly's boots. Broly didn't run. He stood his ground, tilting his head. He wasn't afraid. He had never been taught to fear monsters. He had been taught that he was the monster. The creature lunged. Broly dodged. It became a game. The giant beast would snap at him, and Broly would leap away, laughing. It was the first time he had ever laughed. The sound was foreign to his own throat, rusty and strange, bubbling up from a place of pure joy he hadn't known existed. He dodged again and again, leading the creature on a chase through the rocks, jumping from spire to spire. Over time, the attacks stopped being attacks. The creature realized it couldn't catch the boy. The boy realized the creature didn't really want to eat him. It was just territorial. And then, slowly, curiosity replaced aggression. Broly named it Ba. It was a simple name. The sound the creature made when it roared. Ba. They developed a routine. Every day, after his brutal training with Paragus, Broly would sneak away to the crater. He would sit on the edge, swinging his legs over the abyss. Ba would rise up, resting its massive chin on the rock ledge next to him. Broly would talk to it. He would pour out his heart to this giant beast. "Father is angry today," Broly would whisper, his small hand stroking the creature's nose. The skin was rough like sandpaper, but the fur behind its head was soft, thick and warm. He says, "I have to be stronger. But I don't want to hurt anyone." Ba would rumble, a low vibration that Broly could feel in his chest. It was a comforting sound, like a purr from a creature the size of a mountain. It was the only warmth Broly had ever known that didn't come with a demand for strength. Ba didn't care about power levels. Ba didn't care about revenge. Ba just accepted him. For the first time in his life, Broly had a friend. He wasn't a weapon here. He wasn't the legendary Super Saiyan. He was just a lonely boy playing with a giant dog on a dead planet. Happiness on Vampa was a dangerous distraction. Paragus noticed the change in his son. Broly was disappearing for hours at a time. He was less focused during training. When Paragus commanded him to destroy a target, Broly hesitated. His eyes were softer, less feral. Paragus followed him one day. He hid behind a ridge of shale, watching through the scope of his scouter. He saw Broly sitting with the monster. He saw the boy laughing, burying his face in the creature's green fur. He saw the beast nuzzling the boy gently, treating the powerful Saiyan like one of its own young. Paragus felt a spike of cold fury. Not because the beast was dangerous. Paragus knew Broly could destroy the creature easily, but because the beast was making Broly soft. A Saiyan warrior could not afford attachments. Attachments were weaknesses. If Broly loved this creature, he would hesitate in battle. And if he hesitated, they would never defeat King Vegeta. The weapon was becoming a pet owner. The tool was developing a soul. Paragus made a decision. It was the same cold logic that had killed Beats the pilot. It was the logic of a man consumed by vengeance, a man who had forgotten how to be a father. He raised his ray gun. He aimed not at the boy, but at the beast. Broly was tickling Ba's ear, a massive flap of green fur that twitched with delight. Broly was smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile. Zoom! The laser blast cut through the silence of the wasteland. It happened in slow motion for Broly. The flash of red light, the smell of burning hair, the spray of purple blood against the yellow sky. The blast sheared Ba's ear clean off. The creature roared, not in anger, but in betrayal. It recoiled, thrashing in pain, its massive body slamming against the crater walls. Dust billowed up, choking the air. The ground shook with the force of its agony. "Bah!" Broly screamed, reaching out. He turned and saw his father standing on the ridge, the smoking gun in his hand. Paragus looked down at his son, his expression stern, disappointed. "Playtime is over, Broly. We are not here to make friends with vermin." Broly looked back at the crater. Ba was sinking into the depths, its yellow eyes fixed on Broly. The look in those eyes broke something inside the boy. It wasn't anger. It was fear. The creature was afraid of him. It associated the pain with Broly. It thought Broly had done this. "Bah! Wait!" Broly cried, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the dust. "It wasn't me. Please." But the creature was gone. It disappeared into the dark tunnels beneath the planet's crust, leaving only a trail of blood and a severed ear lying in the dirt. Broly ran to the ear. It was huge, larger than his entire body. He fell onto it, hugging the green fur, sobbing into it. It was still warm. It still smelled like his friend. He waited for days by the crater. He called out into the dark, but Ba never came back. When the creature eventually resurfaced weeks later, it snapped at Broly with genuine malice. The trust was gone. The bond was severed. The only thing that had ever loved him now hated him. Broly realized then that he was truly alone. Even the monsters didn't want him. The incident with Bar changed Broly. He stopped smiling. He stopped laughing. He retreated into himself, a shell of silence protecting a broken heart. He kept the ear. Paragus tried to take it away, calling it a filthy rag, but Broly growled, a low, feral sound that made even Paragus step back in surprise. Broly wrapped the green pelt around his waist. It was soft. It smelled like the only happy memory he had. He wore it every day. He slept clutching it. It was his security blanket, a ghost of the friend he had failed to protect. As Broly entered puberty, the tragedy deepened. His power began to spike uncontrollably. The hormones of adolescence mixed with his latent legendary energy, creating a volatile cocktail. When he got angry, the ground shook. When he had a nightmare, the cave walls cracked. When he felt frustration, the sky seemed to darken in response. Paragus realized he was losing control of the weapon he had forged. The boy was becoming too strong, too unpredictable. The asset was becoming a liability. Paragus found the solution in the wreckage of their ship. He scavenged parts, electrical conduits, nervous system dampeners, heavy metal plating. He worked for days in secret, crafting a device of control. He built a collar. It was a thick silver ring of metal. He placed it around Broly's neck while the boy was sleeping. It locked with a magnetic seal that could not be broken by brute force. Paragus kept the remote control, a small device that fit in the palm of his hand. The first time he used it, Broly was arguing with him. Broly didn't want to train. He wanted to rest. He was tired of the fighting, tired of the pain. He raised his voice. Paragus pressed the button. A high voltage shock slammed directly into Broly's nervous system. It wasn't just pain, it was paralysis. It seized his muscles, locked his joints, and flooded his mind with white-hot agony. It bypassed his physical durability, attacking his nerves directly. Broly dropped to the ground, gasping, clutching his throat. His eyes rolled back. He couldn't scream. He couldn't breathe. "It is for your own good," Paragus said, looking down at him, his thumb hovering over the button. "You must learn control." Control. That was the word Paragus used for slavery. From that day on, the collar was a constant weight around Broly's neck. It was a cold, heavy reminder of who was in charge. It was a leash. Broly learned to fear the movement of his father's thumb. He learned to check his father's mood before speaking. He learned to suppress his emotions, to bury his rage deep, deep down where the lightning couldn't reach him. He became a quiet giant. He stood tall, scarred, wearing the green fur of his lost friend and the metal collar of his captor. He spoke only when spoken to. He ate the green beetles. He stared at the yellow sky. Years turned into decades, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Imagine the monotony. Imagine the silence. Most people would have gone mad. Perhaps in a way Broly did. Or perhaps he simply went dormant, like a seed waiting for rain that might never come. His hair grew long and wild. His skin became tough, weathered by the storms. He forgot what other voices sounded like. He forgot the words for things like sky or hope. He knew only master, father, and kill. The days blended into one another. Wake up, eat the bitter slime, train until his body failed, sleep, repeat. The only variation was the weather. Sometimes the storms were violent, lightning tearing the sky apart. Sometimes the dust was so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. But mostly it was just yellow, endless, oppressive yellow. Paragus grew old. His hair turned gray, his back hunched. He walked with a limp, the gravity of Vampa slowly crushing his bones. But his hate kept him alive. It was the fuel that sustained him when the food ran low. He would stare up at the stars every night, muttering the name Vegeta like a prayer. He told Broly stories of the Saiyans, but they weren't stories of glory. They were stories of grievance. He poisoned Broly's mind with his own bitterness, shaping the boy's worldview until Broly believed that the universe was nothing but enemies waiting to be destroyed. 41 years. Think about that number. 41 years of staring at the same yellow rocks. 41 years of eating the same bitter slime. 41 years without a single act of kindness. Broly was a middle-aged man now, though Saiyans age slowly, so he looked to be in his prime. He was a physical specimen of perfection, rippling with muscles forged by gravity and combat. But inside, he was still that 7-year-old boy sitting on the edge of the crater, waiting for his friend to come back. He would often sit on the high peaks, the wind whipping his black hair, his hand idly stroking the green pelt around his waist. He would watch the storms roll in. He was waiting. He didn't know what for. He just felt that there had to be something else. The universe couldn't just be this. It couldn't just be dust and pain. And then, one day, the silence broke. It wasn't the roar of a beast. It wasn't the thunder of a storm. It was a sonic boom. Broly looked up. Paragus looked up, shielding his eyes against the glare. A ship. Not a junk freighter, not a meteor. A sleek, circular ship gleaming with white metal and purple glass. It pierced the yellow clouds, descending with purpose. It bore an insignia on its hull, a symbol neither of them recognized, yet one that signaled the end of their exile, the mark of the Frieza Force. Paragus began to laugh. It was a dry, cracking sound, like breaking bones. Tears streamed down his wrinkled face. "They found us," he wheezed. "Broly, they found us." Broly stood up slowly. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He watched the ship descend, feeling a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't joy. It was anxiety. The sky was opening up. The cage was unlocking. The monster was being unleashed upon the galaxy. And Broly, the gentle soul trapped in the body of a destroyer, tightened his grip on the green fur at his waist and prepared to meet his destiny. To understand how Broly saw his rescuers, we must first see Vampa through their eyes. The ship that landed was a scout vessel for the Frieza Force. Inside were two soldiers who could not have been more different from the Saiyans. There was Exile, young and spirited with green skin and white hair, and Lemo, an older orange-skinned veteran who had seen too many battles and just wanted a quiet retirement. They stepped out onto the surface of Vampa and immediately regretted it. The gravity hit them like a physical blow. Lemo groaned, his knees buckling under the weight. The wind whipped sand into their faces. The smell of sulfur was overpowering. "What a dump," Exile muttered, checking her scouter. "You really think there's anyone alive down here?" "The distress signal was old," Lemo grumbled, adjusting his armor. "Probably just a ghost. Let's scan and get out of here." They walked through the wasteland, their boots crunching on the shale. To them, this wasn't a home. It was a graveyard. They passed the skeletal remains of giant beetles. They saw the craters where the monsters lived. It was a place hostile to life. Then the scouter beeped. "I'm picking up a reading," Exile said, tapping the side of her device. "Two of them. One is... Wow! The number is huge." They crested a ridge and saw them. Standing by a cave entrance were two figures. One was an old man, withered and bent. His armor cracked and faded to gray. He looked like a specter of the past, a ghost haunting his own grave. But beside him stood a giant. Broly loomed over the old man. He was shirtless, his skin scarred and tanned by the harsh suns. He wore purple tights that were tattered and stretched, and around his waist a strange, matted pelt of green fur fluttered in the wind. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a part of the landscape, as wild and untamed as the storms. Exile stopped. She felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold wind. It wasn't fear exactly. It was awe. "Hey!" Paragus shouted, waving his arms. His voice was cracked, unused to shouting at anyone other than his son. "Here! We are here!" Broly didn't wave. He just watched. He watched the green woman and the orange man. He had never seen colors like that before. He had never seen anyone other than his father. His eyes, usually dull and resigned, flickered with a spark of curiosity. The meeting was awkward, tense. Paragus was desperate, practically throwing himself at the rescuers. He introduced himself as a former commander, trying to summon dignity that had evaporated decades ago. But Exile wasn't looking at Paragus. She was looking at Broly. She walked up to him slowly. Broly tensed. He didn't know what to do. His father had taught him to kill strangers. But this stranger wasn't attacking. She was smiling. "You're a big guy, aren't you?" she said, her voice light. Broly stared at her. He didn't understand the tone. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a reprimand. It was friendly. He leaned down, sniffing the air around her. She smelled different than Vampa. She smelled of oil and soap and something sweet. "Broly," Paragus barked. "Stand down. Show respect." Broly flinched. He pulled back immediately, his eyes darting to his father's hand, checking for the remote. The movement was subtle, But Chilai caught it. She saw the fear. She saw the metal collar around his neck. "He's fine, old man," Chilai said, her smile fading into a frown as she looked at Paragus. "He's just curious." "He is dangerous," Paragus corrected. "But he is useful. We wish to join the Frieza Force." Lemo looked at the scouter reading again. The numbers were still climbing. "If he's as strong as this thing says," Lemo muttered, "Frieza will definitely want him. Come on, let's get off this rock." They led the way back to the ship. Paragus walked quickly, eager to leave his prison. Broly walked slowly. He turned back one last time to look at the cave, to look at the crater where Ba used to live. He was leaving. The only world he remembered. The only home he knew. It was a hellscape, yes, but it was his hellscape. Leaving it felt like stepping off a cliff into the dark. He touched the green fur at his waist. "Goodbye, Ba," he thought. Then he turned and followed the aliens into the wide metal belly of the ship. The airlock hissed shut. The howling wind was cut off instantly, replaced by the soft, rhythmic thrum of the atmospheric recyclers. Broly stood in the hallway of the ship, overwhelmed. It was bright. Too bright. The lights were a harsh, clinical white that hurt his eyes. The walls were smooth metal, cleaner than anything he had ever touched. The floor didn't shift under his feet. And the smell. It was gone. The sulfur, the dust, the rot, all gone. The air here was tasteless. It felt thin in his lungs. "Strap in," Lemo called from the cockpit. "We're breaking orbit." Broly sat on a bench, unsure of what to do with his hands. The ship rumbled. He felt the pressure increase as they lifted off. He looked out the viewport. The yellow ground fell away. The canyons became lines. The mountains became bumps. The clouds swallowed them, and then, with a sudden lurch, they punched through the atmosphere. Stars. Millions of them. Not obscured by dust, not filtered through yellow haze. Pure, diamond-hard points of light against the velvet black. Broly pressed his face to the glass. His breath fogged the surface. He had seen the stars from the ground, but he had never been among them. It was beautiful. It was vast. For the first time in 41 years, the universe didn't feel like a cage, it felt like an ocean. Then, the artificial gravity kicked in. It adjusted to a standard galactic norm, far lighter than Vampa's crushing weight. Broly felt himself float slightly in his seat. His body, conditioned to fight against 10 times gravity, suddenly felt light as a feather. He lifted his hand, and it moved with a speed that surprised him. He felt powerful. He felt free. Paragus sat opposite him, eyes closed, muttering about destiny. He didn't see the stars. He only saw the throne he felt he was owed. "You guys hungry?" Chilai asked. She walked into the small mess area, carrying a bundle of ration bars and water pouches. Broly looked at the items. He had no idea what they were. Chilai tossed a bar to him. He caught it with lightning reflexes. It was wrapped in shiny silver foil. Broly turned it over in his massive hands, confused. He sniffed it. No smell. He tried to bite into it, wrapper and all. "Whoa, wait!" Chi-Lai laughed, reaching out. "You have to unwrap it first, like this." She showed him, peeling back the foil to reveal a brown, compressed block of protein and grain. Broly mimicked her movements. The foil crinkled, a sharp, unnatural sound. He peeled it back. He took a bite. His eyes went wide. It wasn't slime. It wasn't bitter. It was dry, crumbly, and sweet. It tasted like chocolate and oats. To a sophisticated palate, it was cardboard army food. To Broly, it was a revelation. He ate it in 2 bites. Then he looked at Chi-Lai, his eyes asking a silent question. "Go ahead," she smiled, sliding the whole box toward him. He ate another and another. He wasn't just feeding his hunger. He was feeding a sensory deprivation that had lasted 4 decades. Then, the water. Chi-Lai handed him a pouch. "Squeeze it," she instructed. Broly put the straw to his lips and squeezed. Cool, clear liquid rushed into his mouth. It didn't taste like sulfur. It didn't have grit in it. It was pure. It felt like washing his soul. He drank it down in 1 gulp and gasped, wiping his mouth. "Slow down, big guy," Lemo said, leaning against the doorframe. "You'll get a stomach ache." Broly looked at Lemo, then at Chi-Lai. He pointed at the water pouch. "Water?" he rasped. His voice was deep, scratchy from disuse. "Yeah," Chi-Lai said softly. "That's water. Is it good?" Broly nodded. Good. It was a simple word, but the way he said it, with such profound gratitude, made Chi-Lai look away. She felt a pang of sadness for this giant man. How bad had it been down there? "Thank you," Broly said. Chi-Lai looked back at him. He was smiling. It wasn't the feral grin of a warrior. It was a shy, small smile, hidden behind a mouthful of crumbs. "You're welcome," she said. And in that moment, an alliance was formed, not of soldiers, but of friends. The peace didn't last long. A few hours into the flight, a drunk Frieza Force soldier stumbled into the mess hall. He was loud, obnoxious, and looking for trouble. He saw Chi-Lai and made a crude comment, reaching out to grab her arm. "Hey, come here, Greenie," the soldier slurred. Chi-Lai pulled away. "Get off me." The soldier laughed and grabbed tighter. Broly moved. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He just reacted. He was across the room in a blur of speed. He grabbed the soldier's wrist. Crack! He didn't mean to break it. He just didn't know his own strength in this lighter gravity. The soldier screamed, dropping to his knees. "Don't touch her," Broly growled. His eyes flashed. His hair spiked up slightly. A low rumble of energy began to vibrate the floor plates. The soldier looked up in terror at the giant looming over him. Broly raised a fist, his instincts from Vampa taking over. Threat, eliminate. "Broly, stop!" It wasn't Chilai. It was Paragus. Paragus stood in the doorway, the remote in his hand. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't care that Broly was defending someone. He only saw his weapon acting without orders. He pressed the button. Zzz, KT. The sound was sickening. The collar around Broly's neck lit up with blue electricity. Broly gasped, his back arching. The air left his lungs. He dropped the soldier and fell to the floor, clawing at his throat. His massive body convulsed, muscles locking up in agony. He made a sound, a high, strangled whimper that didn't belong to a man of his size. "Dad, stop!" Chilai yelled, horrified. "He was just helping me." Paragus didn't stop. He held the button down for another 5 seconds, ensuring the lesson was learned. "He must control his temper," Paragus said coldly. Broly lay on the metal floor, twitching. Smoke rose from his neck. The smell of ozone filled the room. Paragus released the button. "Get up," he commanded. Broly pushed himself up slowly. He was shaking. He didn't look at Chilai. He didn't look at the soldier. He looked at the floor, shame burning hotter than the shock. He touched the collar, his fingers trembling. Chilai stared at Paragus with pure disgust. She looked at the remote in his hand. She memorized it. "You old monster," she thought. But she didn't say it. She just knelt down next to Broly. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Broly nodded, but his eyes were distant. The light was gone. The joy of the chocolate and the water was gone. He was back in the cage. The cage had just changed shape. Approaching rendezvous point, the ship's computer announced. Lemmo called them to the bridge. "You might want to see this," he said. Broly stood at the back of the cockpit, keeping his distance from everyone. He looked out the massive front viewport. Ahead of them, floating in the darkness of space, was the Frieza Force fleet. It was a city of ships, hundreds of them, massive cruisers shaped like discs, surrounded by swarms of smaller fighters. At the center was the flagship, a behemoth that dwarfed everything else. To Paragus, it looked like an army. It looked like the tool of his revenge. He smiled, a cruel, satisfied twisting of his lips. "Magnificent," he whispered. To Chilai, it looked like business as usual. But to Broly, it looked like a mouth. A giant metal mouth waiting to swallow him whole. He felt the collar tight around his neck. He felt the green fur against his waist. He looked at the endless armada of war machines. He realized then that Vampa had been lonely. Yes, it had been harsh, but on Vampa, the only monsters were the beetles and the storms. Here, in the civilized galaxy, the monsters wore armor. The monsters had buttons that caused pain. The monsters built armies to destroy worlds. As the ship glided into the docking bay of the flagship, Broly felt a deep, heavy sadness settle into his bones. He wasn't being rescued. He was being drafted. The landing gear locked into place with a heavy thud. The ramp lowered. "Come, Broly," Paragus ordered, adjusting his cape. "Lord Frieza is waiting." Broly took a breath of the recycled air. He stepped down the ramp, leaving the quiet of Vampa behind forever, and walked into the noise of his destiny. The ship descended through clouds that were heavy and gray. thick banks of moisture that wrapped around the hull like cotton. Broly sat by the window, his face pressed against the glass. He was expecting Vampa. He was expecting yellow rocks, sulfur pits, and the oppressive weight of a dying star. He was expecting the familiar ugliness of his prison. Instead, he saw white. Endless, blinding white. The ship touched down on a continent of ice. The Arctic. It was a landscape of purity, untouched by the soot of industry or the dust of decay. Glaciers rose up like cathedrals of glass, reflecting the pale sun in 1,000 fractured rainbows. As the ramp lowered, the air that rushed in didn't burn his lungs. It froze them. It was a shock to his system so profound that he gasped, his breath misting in the air before him. It was sharp. It was clean. It tasted of absolutely nothing, and yet it woke up every nerve ending in his body. He stepped out onto the snow. His boots sank into the soft powder with a satisfying crunch. He looked down, confused. The ground wasn't hard shale. It wasn't shifting sand, it was soft, yielding, and unimaginably cold. He reached down and scooped up a handful of the white substance. It was light as air, yet it burned his skin with its temperature. It melted instantly in his hot palm, turning to water that dripped through his scarred fingers. "It's cold," Paragus muttered, shivering in his old armor. He wrapped his cape tighter around himself, his frail body unprepared for the shock. "Why is it so cold? Is this whole planet frozen?" But Broly didn't mind the cold. To him, it was just another sensation in a week of new sensations. He looked around. Jagged mountains of ice rose up like crystals. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, vast and open. It was quiet here, but a different kind of quiet than Vampa. Vampa was silent because it was dead. This place was silent because it was sleeping. It felt peaceful. It felt like a blank page waiting to be written on. Then he sensed them. Two fires burning in the distance. Two energy signatures that felt like stars walking on the surface of the planet. They were warm, vibrant, pulsing with a life force that Broly had never encountered before. Vegeta and Goku. They arrived in thick coats, looking casual, looking happy. Broly watched them from the ridge. He saw the way they stood, relaxed and confident. They didn't have collars. They didn't have scars. They didn't look like weapons. They looked like they belonged in this universe. They looked like they belonged to each other, a bond of rivalry and friendship that Broly couldn't comprehend. Paragus saw them too. And for the first time in 41 years, the old man smiled. It was a smile of pure distilled hatred. It was a grotesque expression that twisted his wrinkled face. "Broly," Paragus whispered. The tone was different. It wasn't the drill sergeant tone. It was the tone of a man lighting a fuse. "Look at him. That is Vegeta, the son of the king who threw us away, the son of the man who sentenced you to die." Broly looked at the man with the flame-like hair. He felt nothing. No hate, no anger, just confusion. Why should he hate this stranger? This stranger hadn't hurt him. The stranger hadn't put a collar on his neck. "Do it," Paragus commanded, his voice trembling with anticipation. "Attack!" Broly hesitated. The green fur at his waist fluttered in the Arctic wind. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to eat another chocolate bar. He wanted to talk to Chilai about the white ground. He wanted to ask why the air hurt his face. "Broly!" Paragus screamed, his patience snapping. "Attack!" The conditioning took over. The years of shocks, the years of pain, the neural pathways burned into his brain that equated disobedience with agony. His body reacted before his mind could protest. Broly's muscles tensed. The peaceful silence of the Arctic was broken by the sound of his boots launching off the ice. He flew forward, a tragic missile fired by a bitter old man aiming for a target he didn't understand. The fight began not with a bang, but with a slide. Broly crashed into Vegeta, their fists meeting, the impact blowing away the snow for a mile in every direction, revealing the dark blue ice beneath. To an observer, it looked like a battle of titans. To Broly, it felt like drowning. He was fighting Vegeta, but his mind was a blur. He was reacting on pure instinct. Block, punch, dodge, kick. His body knew the motions, forged by decades of survival against the Vampa beetles. But his heart wasn't in it. He was fighting a ghost, fighting a command, fighting the fear of the remote in his father's pocket. Vegeta was skilled. He was precise. He moved like water, deflecting Broly's raw, unpolished attacks with frustrating ease. Vegeta didn't just fight, he dissected. He slipped past Broly's guard, landing sharp, stinging blows that pushed Broly back. Vegeta transformed, his hair turning gold. The heat radiating from him melted the ice beneath their feet, turning the battlefield into a slushy lake. Broly felt the pressure. He felt the gap in skill. And that feeling, that frustration, it woke up the monster. On Vampa, anger was a survival tool. When the giant ticks attacked, you got angry or you got eaten. Fear was useless. Sadness was useless. Only rage kept you alive. Broly's breathing hitched. His eyes dilated. The wrath state began to bubble up from his core. It felt like a dam breaking inside his chest. The reasoning part of his brain, the part that liked water and Chilai, was flooded by a rising tide of red energy. It was a physical sensation, a burning heat that started in his stomach and rushed into his limbs. He roared. The sound echoed off the ice mountains, shaking the glaciers. His power spiked. He grew larger, his muscles swelling, his eyes turning yellow. He wasn't fighting Vegeta anymore. He was fighting the memory of every hungry night. He was fighting the silence of the cave. He was fighting the collar. He punched Vegeta through a mountain of ice. The sheer force of the blow vaporized the rock, turning it into steam. Vegeta, realizing the danger, transformed again. Red hair. Godly Kai. The Super Saiyan God. He stopped Broly's fist with a single hand. He looked at Broly, not with fear, but with pity. He saw the lack of control. He punched Broly, sending him crashing through multiple ice sheets. Broly Broly crashed into the frozen rock. Pain, cold, confusion. He lay there for a second, staring up at the pale sky. "Father?" he thought, dazed. "Is this enough? Can we stop now?" But Paragus was watching from the sidelines, his face twisted in a grimace. "More!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. "Kill him! Don't stop until he is dead." There was no escape. The only way out was through the rage. So Broly let go. He stopped trying to think. He surrendered to the storm. He let the red energy consume him, erasing the boy and leaving only the weapon. Vegeta stepped back, sensing the change. He realized that brute force was only making Broly stronger, feeding the beast. The battle shifted. Goku stepped in. Goku was different. When Goku fought, he didn't radiate arrogance. He radiated excitement. He bounced on his toes. He smiled. Even in the face of a monster, Goku found joy in the challenge. "Hey!" Goku shouted over the wind, dodging a massive haymaker. "You're incredible! Who taught you to fight like that?" Broly roared in response, a mindless sound of fury. He attacked Goku, his blows heavy enough to shatter continents. But Goku moved like the wind, weaving through the attacks, trying to communicate. "You don't have to do this!" Goku yelled, catching Broly's fist and holding it, forcing Broly to look at him. "I can tell you are not a bad guy. You don't want to be doing this, do you?" The words penetrated the fog for a second. Broly paused. He looked at Goku. He saw kindness in those eyes. It was confusing. Why was his enemy being nice? Why was the person he was supposed to kill asking him how he felt? Broly's trembling hand loosened for a fraction of a second. For a fleeting moment, Broly looked like a lost child. He looked toward the cliff where his father stood. He was looking for permission to stop. He was begging with his eyes to be let off the leash. "Don't listen to him!" Paragus screamed, terrified that his weapon was malfunctioning. "He is the enemy! Destroy him!" The leash tightened. The moment of connection shattered. Broly screamed in frustration, a sound of pure anguish. He grabbed Goku by the leg and slammed him into the ice. The ice shattered, sending geysers of water shooting into the air. Goku transformed. Blue hair, the power of a god. The fight escalated. They broke through the dimensions of reality. The sheer density of their energy tore a hole in the fabric of space-time. Suddenly, the white Arctic was gone. Broly found himself in a dimension of pure chaos. Colors swirled around him, violets, greens, neons that didn't exist in nature. It was like falling through a kaleidoscope. There was no up, no down, no air, no ground. Broly was spinning. He was falling. He was hitting Goku, and Goku was hitting him, but it felt like a dream. The rage was the only thing that made sense. The rage was the anchor. He was scared. Deep down, beneath the roaring muscle and the green energy blasts, Broly was terrified. He was out of control. He was hurting people. He was lost in a nightmare that wouldn't end. He just wanted to go back to the cave. He just wanted to sit with Ba and watch the yellow clouds. He wanted the noise to stop. But the storm raged on, and Broly was the eye of the hurricane. While the giants fought in the abstract dimension, eventually crashing back to Earth, a smaller tragedy played out on the ground. The landscape had changed. The pristine white Arctic was gone. The heat of the battle had melted the glaciers, turning the battlefield into a hellscape of jagged rock and rising magma. Steam hissed from the ground. The sky had turned black, choked by smoke and energy discharge. Frieza stood on a rock, watching the battle with bored amusement. He saw Broly's power plateauing. The boy was strong, yes, but he was reaching his limit against two Super Saiyan Blues. He was regaining his senses, starting to falter. Frieza remembered a legend. The Super Saiyan transformation, the true golden form, is triggered by intense emotional trauma, by loss, by the breaking of the heart. He looked at Paragus. The old man was trembling, watching his son fight, realizing that his revenge was failing. Paragus was spent. He had given his entire life to this moment, and it wasn't enough. Frieza smiled. A cruel, thin smile. He raised his hand. He pointed a finger. A single small death beam. Silent. Accurate. It pierced Paragus's chest. The old commander gasped. It wasn't a dramatic death. It was quiet. He looked down at the hole in his armor. He looked up at Frieza, confusion in his eyes. There was no time for final words. No time for regret. No time to tell his son he was sorry. He simply collapsed into the snow, a lifetime of hatred ending in a pile of slush. In the sky, Broly stopped. He sensed it. The sudden absence of a familiar energy. The lifeline he had held onto for 41 years was gone. Father? Broly landed. He looked down. He saw the body. He saw Frieza standing over it, feigning shock, acting out a play for an audience of one. "Oh no!" Frieza shouted, his voice dripping with false theatricality. "Broly, look! It's a tragedy. A stray blast killed your father." Broly stared at the body. The world went silent. The wind stopped. The magma stopped bubbling. His father, the man who had fed him, the man who had trained him, the man who had put the collar on him, the man who was the only constant in his entire existence, the man who defined his world. Gone. The grief hit him first, a wave of absolute, crushing sorrow. It bowed his shoulders. He reached out a hand, trembling, as if to wake the old man up. But Broly didn't know how to process grief. He had never been taught to cry. He had never been comforted. He had only been taught to fight. He had only been taught that emotion was fuel. So the grief curdled. It boiled instantly into something else. Rage. Pure, unadulterated, legendary rage. Broly threw his head back. His pupils vanished. His hair stood on end, turning a glowing incandescent gold. His aura exploded, turning from green to a blinding yellow. He screamed. It wasn't a battle cry. It was the sound of a soul breaking. It was a sound that shook the planet to its core. The continental shelf cracked. The sky turned a bruised purple. Lightning struck the ground, drawn to the sheer density of his power. Broly was gone. The boy who liked water was gone. The friend of Ba was gone. There was only the legendary Super Saiyan, a mindless, unstoppable force of nature, driven by pain so deep it could burn the universe to ash. Goku and Vegeta realized immediately that they could not win. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a natural disaster. Broly was attacking everything. He wasn't targeting them specifically. He was attacking existence itself. He was vomiting energy beams from his mouth, tearing up the landscape, trying to destroy the pain by destroying the world. Goku and Vegeta retreated. They fled to perform the fusion dance, knowing that only the combined power of Gogeta could stop this monster. Broly was left alone with Frieza. For an hour, Broly beat the Emperor of the Universe. He didn't know who Frieza was. He didn't care. He just saw a target. He pounded Frieza into the rock, venting 41 years of pain onto the tyrant. It was a brutal, cathartic punishment, but it brought Broly no peace. He was trapped in the gold form, burning up from the inside, his mind a screaming void of white noise. Then, Gogeta arrived. The fusion warrior was calm, serious. He didn't play around. He engaged Broly, matching his power, then surpassing it. The fight reached a crescendo of light and sound that threatened to destroy the continent. But Broly was losing. He knew he was losing. Through the haze of rage, fear began to creep back in. He was being beaten. He was going to die. On the sidelines, Chilai was watching. She was hiding behind a rock with Lemo. She held the Dragon Balls, the 7 magic orbs they had stolen from Frieza's ship during the chaos. She watched the battle in horror. She watched Broly fighting Gogeta. She saw the fear in Broly's eyes, hidden behind the rage. She saw a man who had been used his entire life, about to be put down like a rabid dog. "He's going to die," Chilai cried, tears freezing on her cheeks. "He didn't do anything wrong. They made him do this. It's not fair." She looked at the dragon, Shenron, who was hovering in the sky, waiting for a wish. The massive green serpent looked down with impassive red eyes. Gogeta charged a final attack. A massive blue Kamehameha. It hummed with enough energy to vaporize a moon. Gogeta raised his hands. He fired. The blue beam screamed across the sky, heading straight for Broly. Broly stood there, panting, his eyes wide. He couldn't dodge. He couldn't block. He looked at the beam, accepting his fate. So this is how it ends, he thought. Just like Vampa, just like Ba, alone. "Shenron!" Chilai screamed at the sky, her voice cracking with desperation. The dragon lowered its head. "Send Broly home. Send him back to the planet where we found him." The dragon's eyes glowed red. "Your wish is granted." Just as the blue beam was about to vaporize Broly, a flash of magic light engulfed him. It was warm. It was gentle. It felt like being pulled out of a nightmare. The beam hit nothing but empty air. It exploded against the horizon, a massive mushroom cloud of energy rising into the stratosphere, clearing the clouds and revealing the sun. But Broly was gone. Chilai collapsed into the snow, sobbing with relief. Lemo put a hand on her shoulder. They had defied Frieza. They had stolen a wish. But they had saved their friend. Silence. Heat. Sulfur. Broly hit the ground hard. He rolled, coughing, dust filling his mouth. He blinked, his vision clearing. The white snow was gone. The blue sky was gone. The noise of the battle was gone. Above him, the bruised yellow clouds of Vampa churned slowly. He sat up. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. The golden aura faded. His hair turned back to black. The rage drained out of him, leaving him empty, hollowed out, and exhausted. He looked around. He was back in the crater. The same jagged rocks, the same smell of rot. He was alone. Paragus was dead. The collar was gone. He was back in his prison. But this time, there was no one to tell him what to do. No one to give him orders. No one to define his existence. He pulled his knees to his chest and wrapped his arms around himself. He touched the green fur at his waist. It was frayed, dusty, but still soft. He started to cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook his massive frame. He cried for his father despite everything. He cried for the confusion. He cried for the overwhelming noise of the last few hours. He cried because he was alive, and he didn't know what to do with that fact. But then, a sound. A ship engine. Broly looked up, wiping his eyes. A small shuttle was descending through the yellow clouds. It was a stolen Frieza Force supply ship. It landed clumsily nearby, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. Chilai walked out, wearing a thick coat she hadn't had time to take off. She was sweating in the Vampa heat. Lemo followed, carrying a crate of supplies, water, food, blankets. Chilai looked around the desolate wasteland. She wrinkled her nose at the smell. "Well," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I guess we're roommates now." Broly stood up. He looked at them. They had come for him. They had left the army, left civilization, left everything just to come live on a rock with a monster. They had chosen exile just to be with him. Chilai smiled. It was the same smile she had given him when she handed him the chocolate bar. "Hey, big guy, hungry?" Broly didn't say anything. He couldn't speak. The knot in his chest loosened. He walked over to them, his steps heavy but sure. And very gently, he wrapped them both in a hug. For the first time in 41 years, Broly wasn't waiting for a rescue. He wasn't waiting for revenge. He was home. And this time home wasn't empty. The dust from the shuttle landing had settled. The adrenaline of the escape had faded, drained away by the sheer reality of being alive. It was replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that weighed on all three of them, a heaviness that made their limbs feel like lead. Night fell on Vampa. The three moons rose in succession, casting their pale, sickly light over the wasteland. The temperature plummeted rapidly, the heat of the day evaporating into the thin atmosphere. The wind picked up its nightly chorus, howling through the jagged canyons, whistling through the cracks in the rock like a choir of ghosts. But inside the stolen supply ship, it was warm. The cargo hold was small, smelling of engine grease and ozone, but it was a sanctuary. The metal walls vibrated gently with the hum of the life support systems, a rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat that pushed back the silence of the planet. Broly sat on the floor of the cargo hold, his back resting against a crate of rations. He was wrapped in a thermal blanket Chilai had given him, a silver, crinkly material that reflected the dim emergency lights. He was staring at his hands. They were large, scarred, capable of crushing planets. They were hands that had just gone toe-to-toe with gods. But right now, they were just hands. They were still. They were resting on his knees, palms up, open to the air. He felt empty. It wasn't a bad emptiness. It wasn't the hunger of his childhood. It was the emptiness of a vessel that had been poured out. The rage that had fueled him on Earth. The infinite burning power that had consumed his mind had left a hollow space inside him. He felt lightheaded. He felt a strange, floating confusion. Memories of the battle flashed in his mind like disjointed nightmares, vivid and terrifying. He saw the cold white ice of the Arctic. He felt the shock of the punches that had rattled his bones. He saw the blinding blue light of the energy blasts. And, most clearly of all, he saw the sight of his father's body lying in the snow. Paragus was gone. The realization hit him in slow waves. It wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was a dull ache, a bruising of the soul. Broly reached up and touched his neck. His fingers brushed against skin, scarred and tough. The collar was gone. For 41 years, his life had been defined by those two things: his father and the collar. His father was the voice of authority. The collar was the mechanism of control. They were the boundaries of his world. Now, both were absent. The silence where his father's voice used to be was deafening. The lightness where the heavy metal ring used to sit made him feel dizzy. He felt untethered, like a balloon whose string had been cut, drifting in a vast open sky with no direction. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know who he was without an order to follow. "Hey!" The voice broke his trance. It was soft, tentative. Chilai walked into the hold. She looked tired. Her white hair was messy, her green skin pale under the artificial lights. She was holding a steaming cup in her hands. "You okay?" she asked. Broly looked up. He watched her for a moment, processing the question. Was he okay? He didn't know the definition of the word. He was alive. He wasn't hurting. He nodded slowly. "Here," she said, handing him the cup. "It's soup. Instant soup from the rations. It's not great. It's basically salty water with some protein chunks. But it's hot." Broly took the cup. His massive hands engulfed it. He could feel the heat radiating through the ceramic, seeping into his calloused palms. He brought it to his face. He blew on the steam, mimicking what he had seen Chilai do earlier. The steam smelled of savory spices, artificial but comforting. He took a sip. It was salty and warm. It spread through his chest, a liquid heat that seemed to chase away the lingering chill of the Arctic. It grounded him. It reminded him that he was a physical being, that he had needs, that he was safe. "Where is Lemo?" Broly asked. His voice was a low rumble, rough from the screaming, scratchy from disuse. "He's in the cockpit," Chilai said, sitting down next to him on the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to figure out how much fuel we have left. Spoiler alert, it's not much. We burned most of it getting here in a hurry. We're stuck here for a while. Broly looked around the metal walls of the ship. He looked at the sealed airlock. "Stuck," he repeated. "Yeah," Chilai sighed, leaning her head back against the wall and closing her eyes. "But hey, look on the bright side. At least Frieza can't find us here. This planet is a blind spot on the star charts. We're off the grid." She opened one eye and looked at him. "We're free, Broly. Free." Broly tested the word in his mind. He rolled it around, examining it from different angles. Free. It meant no collar. It meant no shocks. It meant no fighting unless he wanted to. He looked down at the green pelt around his waist. It was frayed, dusty, smelling of old earth. He ran his thumb over the matted fur. He looked at Chilai, who was closing her eyes again, drifting off to sleep right there on the hard floor. She trusted him. She felt safe enough to sleep next to a monster. He looked at the cup of soup in his hands. He wasn't being ordered to train. He wasn't being told to kill. He was just sitting. He was just existing. He took another sip of soup. The warmth filled his belly. He closed his eyes, listening to the hum of the ship and the breathing of his friend. And for the first time in his life, Broly slept without nightmares. He didn't dream of falling. He didn't dream of pain. He dreamed of nothing. Just a vast, peaceful silence. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. It wasn't the monotonous, grinding rhythm of his childhood, governed by fear and obedience. It was a new rhythm, organic and improvised. It was a rhythm of cooperation. They needed to survive. Vampa was still Vampa, harsh, unforgiving, and full of monsters. But now, Broly wasn't facing it alone. He wasn't the sole provider for a bitter old man. He was a partner. He became the protector. It was a role he fell into naturally. When the giant Vampa beetles scurried out of their craters, hungry for the intruders, drawn by the scent of the ship, Broly didn't kill them. He didn't need to. He would simply step outside, stand tall, and flare his aura. A quick flash of green energy, a ripple of power that sent a clear message. I am the apex predator here. The creatures would freeze. Their antennae would twitch. And then they would scuttle away, terrified, disappearing back into the dark. He remembered Ba. He remembered that they were just animals trying to survive too. He felt a strange kinship with them. They were ugly, dangerous things, living on an ugly, dangerous rock. Just like him. Chilai and Lemo handled the logistics. They were the brains of the operation. They rationed the food with military precision. They jury-rigged the ship's filtration systems to purify water from the underground sulfur springs, turning the foul liquid into something drinkable. They turned the cargo hold into a living space, stacking crates to make tables, using spare parts to build makeshift chairs. It was hard living. The food was bland, mostly nutrient paste and dry bars. The water still tasted faintly metallic, leaving a coating on the tongue. The storms still raged outside, shaking the ship on its landing struts. But there was laughter. That was the biggest change. That was the thing that made the air in the ship feel lighter than the air in the cave. Laughter. Lemo would tell stories about his time in the army, grumbling about incompetent commanders and terrible assignments, acting out the scenes with exaggerated gestures. Chilai would tease him about his age, calling him grandpa and stealing his desserts. Broly would watch them. He would sit cross-legged on the floor, his massive frame taking up half the room, his eyes darting back and forth between them like a spectator at a tennis match. He didn't always understand the jokes. Irony and sarcasm were foreign languages to him. But he liked the sound of them. He liked the cadence of their voices. He liked that the noise in the room wasn't angry. He liked that no one was yelling. One evening, while the wind was particularly loud outside, battering the hull with sand, Chilai caught him staring at the green pelt around his waist. She sat down next to him. "That was your friend, right?" she asked softly. "The one you told us about on the flight over? Ba?" Broly nodded. He didn't look up. He ran his thumb over the matted fur, feeling the texture of the dead skin beneath. "My only friend." "Not anymore," Chilai said. Broly looked at her. She was smiling. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was open, genuine. She bumped his shoulder with hers. "Now, you've got 2 more," she said. "And honestly, we're way better looking than a giant green bug. No offense to Ba." Broly felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was a warmth that had nothing to do with ki energy. It started in his stomach and rose to his throat. His mouth twitched. The muscles of his face, unused to this specific movement, struggled for a moment. Then the corners of his lips turned up. He smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the scars on his cheeks. "Yes," Broly said, his voice soft. "Better looking." Chilai laughed, loud and bright. Lemo chuckled from the cockpit. The sound echoed in the small ship, bouncing off the metal walls, drowning out the wind outside. In that moment, the ship felt like a castle. It felt impenetrable. 3 days later, the peace was interrupted. Broly was outside. The morning, or what passed for morning on Vampa, was hazy. He was hauling large rocks, stacking them to build a windbreak around the ship's landing gear to protect the stabilizers. He was lost in the physical labor, enjoying the simple act of lifting and moving. Then he sensed it. A presence. It wasn't a Vampa beetle. It wasn't the low-level hum of Chilai or Lemo. It was a power. A massive, radiant power that felt like the sun condensed into a single point. It was overwhelming. He dropped the rock. It cracked the shale with a loud thud. His muscles tensed instantly, turning rock hard. His breath hitched in his throat. He knew that feeling. He had felt it on Earth. He had felt it punching him through dimensions. Goku, he whispered. He turned to the sky. A streak of light appeared in the yellow clouds, piercing the gloom. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't an engine. It was a person using instant transmission to lock onto his energy signature, PAP. With a sound like displaced air, Goku appeared out of thin air. He was standing just a few yards away on the shale, looking calm, looking out of place in his bright orange gi. Broly stepped back, his boots skidding on the rock. His eyes went wide. The panic flared instantly. Memories of the fight rushed back. The punches, the ice, the overwhelming force of the blue form. Broly's hands curled into fists. A low growl started in his throat, involuntary and feral. The green aura flickered around his body, buzzing like a high-tension wire. Chilai and Lemo ran out of the ship, hearing the commotion. They saw Goku and froze. "Hey!" Chilai screamed. She didn't hesitate. She put herself between Broly and Goku, spreading her arms. She pulled her ray gun, aiming it at the Saiyan with the spiky hair. Her hand was shaking, but she didn't lower it. "You get out of here," she yelled. "Leave him alone. Haven't you done enough?" Goku held up his hands, palms open. He wasn't in a fighting stance. He wasn't transformed. He looked relaxed. He looked friendly. "Whoa, easy," Goku said, his voice cheerful, diffusing the tension. "I'm not here to fight, I promise." "Then why are you here?" Lemo shouted, grabbing a metal pipe from the ground as a weapon, though he knew it was useless against a god-level being. "To finish the job? He's done. He's not bothering anyone. We're in exile." "I know," Goku said. He lowered his hands slowly. He looked past them, locking eyes with Broly. I brought some stuff." Goku reached into his belt and pulled out a small metal case. He tossed it gently to Lemo. Lemo caught it, fumbling with the catch. He looked at it suspiciously. "What is this?" "Capsules," Goku explained. "Bulma, my friend, the genius scientist, she put together some supplies. There's a house in there, like a full house with a kitchen and beds and a shower, and enough food for months, and fresh water tanks." Chilai lowered her gun slightly. She looked at the case, then at Goku. "A house?" "Yeah," Goku smiled, scratching the back of his head. "This place looks pretty rough. I figured you guys could use a break. It's not much, but it's better than sleeping in a cargo hold." Broly watched Goku. He was confused. His combat instincts were screaming threat, but his eyes were seeing something else. This was the enemy. This was the man he had tried to kill, the man who had beaten him. And he was bringing gifts? He was bringing shelter? Broly's aura faded. The green light died down, his fists unclenched. He stepped out from behind Chilai, gently moving her aside. "Why?" Broly asked. His voice was rough. It was a struggle to form the word. Goku looked at him. His expression turned serious, but not unkind. The goofiness vanished, replaced by a warrior's respect. Because you're a Saiyan, Goku said. Like me. There aren't many of us left. We're a dying breed, and I saw what happened. You didn't want to fight. You were forced to. I could feel it. You're not evil, Broly. You're just strong. Goku took a step forward. Chi-Lai tensed again, but Broly put a hand on her shoulder, signaling her to wait. You're strong, Goku repeated, a spark of excitement returning to his eyes. Maybe stronger than anyone I've ever met. And I've met some strong guys. It would be a waste if you just sat here and rotted on this rock. Goku reached into his gi again and pulled out a small pouch. He took out 2 small green beans. Senzu beans. These will heal up any scratches you got. Left, he said, tossing them to Broly. Broly caught them. He looked at the small green beans in his massive palm. He could feel the life energy radiating from them. I'll come back sometimes, Goku said, to bring supplies, to check in, and maybe, if you want, we can spar. Not a death match, not for Frieza, just training, so you can learn to control that power, so it doesn't control you. Control. That word had always meant pain to Broly. It meant the collar, it meant the shock. But the way Goku said it, it sounded like freedom. It sounded like mastery. It sounded like a choice. Broly looked at Goku. He saw no deception. He saw only a warrior who loved the fight, offering a hand to another warrior who had been hurt by it. Broly nodded. Once. A sharp, decisive movement. Goku grinned. It was a blinding grin. He put 2 fingers to his forehead, preparing to teleport away. Wait! Chi-Lai called out. What's your name? Goku paused. He looked back at them. He looked at Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, the Exile, the survivor. He thought about his own history. He thought about his Saiyan name, the name he had rejected for so long, and the name he was finally embracing. It's Goku, he said. Then he smiled, a look of pure Saiyan pride crossing his face. But, Broly, you can call me Kakarot. Pop. He was gone. The yellow dust swirled where he had been standing. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Lemo looked at the case in his hand. He picked out a capsule labeled House. He threw it. Poof! A cloud of white smoke erupted, expanding rapidly. When it cleared, a house stood on the Vampa plains. It was a round, dome-shaped structure, typical of capsule core design. It was white and yellow, gleaming in the dull light. It had windows. It had a door. It had a soft, inviting light glowing from inside. It looked like a spaceship, but one designed for staying, not leaving. They walked in. Broly stopped in the doorway. He was afraid to step inside. The floor was carpeted in a soft beige fabric. There was a couch with plush cushions. There was a kitchen unit with a refrigerator that hummed quietly. There was a television. "Look at this!" Lemo shouted, opening the fridge. The light from inside illuminated his face. Fresh meat, vegetables, milk, actual milk. Chilai threw herself onto the couch, bouncing on the cushions. She groaned in pleasure. Oh, my back is so happy right now. Lemo, I'm never sleeping on a metal floor again. Broly walked to the middle of the room. He felt huge in the space. He looked up at the ceiling. It wasn't rock. It wasn't metal. It was clean, white plaster. It felt safe. Broly, Chilai said softly. Come sit. He walked over to the couch. He sat down next to her. The cushions sank under his weight. It was soft, softer than the snow on Earth, softer than the moss in the crater. It held him. Lemo started cooking. For the first time, the smell wasn't of burning rations or instant powder. It was the smell of searing meat, of spices, of fresh vegetables. It was intoxicating. They ate together at a small table. Broly ate slowly this time. He didn't shovel the food in like a starving animal. He tasted it. He savored the textures. He watched his friends eating. After dinner, they turned off the main lights. The glow of the Vampa moons shone through the porthole windows, painting the room in silver. Broly went to his room. He had a room, a private space. It had a bed with sheets and a pillow. It had a nightstand. He lay down on the mattress. It felt like sleeping on a cloud. He pulled the blanket up to his chin. He reached down and unhooked the green pelt from his waist. He looked at it for a long time. The fur was old, matted and stained with the dust of 40 years. It was a relic of a harder time. "Good night, Ba," he whispered. He folded the pelt carefully, treating it with reverence, and placed it on the nightstand next to his bed. He didn't need to wear it for protection anymore. He didn't need to clutch it for comfort against the cold rock. He was safe. He lay back, staring at the white ceiling. He listened to the wind outside, howling against the reinforced walls of the capsule house. It sounded distant now. It couldn't reach him. Inside, it was quiet. Inside, there was only the sound of Lemo snoring in the next room and the hum of the refrigerator. Broly closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he wasn't waiting for anything. He wasn't waiting for his father to yell. He wasn't waiting for rescue. He wasn't waiting for the next meal. He wasn't waiting for the pain to start. He was just being. And in the quiet dark of the room, a single tear rolled down his cheek. Not of sadness, but of relief. A release of tension held for 41 years. The long, tragic journey was over. The exile was finished. The legendary Super Saiyan was finally, truly asleep. And so, we leave him there, sleeping peacefully in a warm bed, surrounded by friends, with a full belly and a quiet heart. Broly's story is one of tragedy, yes. It is a story of a stolen childhood, of a father's ambition, and of a power too great to control. It is a story of pain inflicted by those who should have protected him. But it is also a story of resilience. It is proof that even the deepest wounds can heal. Proof that even in the darkest wastelands, flowers can grow if they are given a little bit of water. Proof that you are not defined by what was done to you, but by who you choose to be when the fighting stops. He is no longer a weapon. He is no longer a tool. He is just Broly. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let his peace be your peace. Let the warmth of his new home wrap around you. You are safe. You are loved. And you have earned your rest. Good night, warriors. Good night.